In Dayton, peace wears a smile by day, but at night, it whispers through blood and broken glass. A man collapsed beside a pool table, dice still rolling beside his hand. A woman's final breath fogged the window of her car before dawn. A lover chased vengeance through shattered glass and silence. And a worker fell on a sunlit street, grass clippings still on his shoes. These were not just crime scenes, they were lives paused mid-sentence, humanity fractured in ordinary places. Now, every verdict brought justice, but never balanced. Because in Dayton, even peace has scars that never heal. And this is Inside Dayton's Darkest Black Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Laura Taylor. What began as an ordinary Christmas week in Dayton turned into a relentless spiral of violence that stunned Ohio forever. Marvelous Matthew King was just 19 when he led 3 companions through a series of killings that came to define the downtown posse murders. Between December 24 and 26, 1992, 6 people lost their lives during a spree that investigators would later call a sequence of joy killings. King, who had no criminal record before that winter, became the triggerman in 4 of the murders that unfolded across the city. The spree started on Christmas Eve when the group targeted Joseph Wilkerson, an acquaintance of King's girlfriend Laura Taylor. Promised an intimate gathering, Wilkerson allowed the group into his home. Once inside, he was bound with electrical cords and shot, first by King, then by Taylor, to eliminate any chance of resistance. Within hours, the gang encountered Danita Golette using a payphone. They took her coat and sneakers before King shot her multiple times, leaving her body on the sidewalk. Police would later find shell casings from a .25 caliber pistol that tied both murders together. That same evening, Heather Matthews' former boyfriend, Jeffrey Wright, was shot 4 times but survived. The next morning, Taylor lured her ex-boyfriend Richmond Maddox into his car. While driving, she pulled the trigger, killing him instantly. By Christmas night, Keene and DeMarcus Smith entered a local grocery store owned by Sarah Abraham's family. After she handed over $40, Keene shot her in the head and wounded another customer who managed to escape. The killings were random and quick, showing little pattern beyond opportunity and impulse. Fear of exposure led to the final 2 murders. On December 26, the group convinced their friends Wendy Cottrell and Marvin Washington to follow them to a gravel pit on Dayton's outskirts. There, King executed Cottrell while Smith killed Washington. Investigators later confirmed the 2 teenagers had bragged about the earlier murders, and the gang feared they might talk to police. The investigation unfolded with grim efficiency. Detectives traced the group through Wilkerson's stolen car and the unique .25 caliber Blazer aluminum casings found at several scenes. When police spotted the suspects in a stolen Dodge Shadow, the arrest came without a chase. In questioning, King confessed to most of the shootings, admitting his role as the primary gunman. Ballistic evidence and recovered weapons confirmed his statements. Prosecutors described the spree as calculated, noting that the gang planned robberies but killed mostly for thrill. King was tried before a 3-judge panel in Montgomery County in 1993. He was convicted of multiple counts of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. His appeals were denied, and public reaction remained quiet but resolute, focused more on closure than debate. Marvelous King was executed by lethal injection on the 21st of July 2009 at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. His 3 accomplices remain in prison, serving life sentences. A crime that began as reckless rebellion became a brutal lesson in consequence, one that turned the season of peace into one of Ohio's darkest Christmases. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Noah Messiah Corbitt. He had just finished an overnight shift at an Amazon facility when anger followed him onto the highway and changed 2 lives forever. At 24, Noah Messiah Corbitt of Ohio carried a grudge that began years earlier over a failed $200 gun sale. By September 2024, that resentment would fuel a road rage shooting that killed an innocent woman and shocked the city of Dayton. Corbitt, a young father himself, targeted a CO worker he blamed for taking his money years before. His intended confrontation turned deadly when his bullet struck the wrong person, 26-year-old mother Jermaya Lyle, who was sleeping next to her daughter on the way home from a night shift. The night before the killing, Corbitt confronted the man at work during their shift at Amazon. The man refused to fight, not wanting to lose his job. Hours later, after both finished their shift around 6:30 in the morning, Corbitt watched as the man left in a silver Nissan Altima driven by Lyle. Determined to settle the old dispute, Corbitt followed them in his blue Chevrolet Impala through the quiet streets of Vandalia. Witnesses later reported that the two vehicles merged onto Interstate 35 westbound as traffic began to thin at dawn. Corbitt pulled alongside, lowered his driver's window, and fired a single left-handed shot from a 9mm Taurus pistol. The hollow-point bullet traveled through the trunk and back seat before striking Lyle in the head as she slept. The round missed her child's car seat by less than 2 feet. Her passenger, Corbitt's intended target, watched helplessly as the car veered onto the shoulder. First responders reached the scene within minutes, but Lyle was pronounced dead at Miami Valley Hospital by 7:15 a.m. The shooting left investigators stunned at its randomness, calling it a senseless act of vengeance disguised as road rage. Detectives quickly traced a description of the suspect's vehicle, a blue Impala seen fleeing westbound. Within hours, they located the car outside Corbitt's residence. A search revealed a 9mm magazine, and ballistic testing later matched the weapon to the fatal shot. Corbitt was taken into custody without resistance. Investigators described him as cooperative, even talkative, during interrogation. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and the recovered handgun built a clear timeline linking him to the scene. Prosecutors later said his actions showed elements of premeditation, confronting the target, following the vehicle, and firing deliberately before driving away. In October 2024, Corbitt was formally indicted and held in pretrial detention. He pleaded guilty in Montgomery County Court to murder by felonious assault, multiple counts of assault with a deadly weapon, and discharging a firearm near prohibited premises. The court accepted a plea agreement and sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Noah Corbitt remains incarcerated today, serving his sentence in state custody. A single shot meant for revenge became a permanent lesson in how senseless violence on America's highways can destroy innocent lives in seconds. Number 3. DeTravon Mitchell and Tylan Peaks. They weren't old enough to drive legally, but by the end of one January night, two young men had killed a man behind the wheel. In 2022, DeTravon Mitchell and Tylan Peaks of Dayton, Ohio, were charged after a deadly series of carjackings. Their final target was 35-year-old Lyft driver Brandon Cooper, a husband from Beaver Creek working overnight to support his family. The young man created an untraceable Lyft account under a false name, Jimmy Smith, to lure drivers. Their plan began with the armed robbery of a female Lyft driver on Agnes Street, where they stole her vehicle and wallet before abandoning it nearby. Hours later, at about 2 a.m., they used the same account to summon Cooper to Ferguson Avenue. When Cooper arrived, the group waited in the dark. Witnesses later described a flash of muzzle light followed by the screech of tires. Cooper had been shot twice in the back while seated in his car. The vehicle drifted forward, crashing into a curb as an automated OnStar crash alert and the city's ShotSpotter system simultaneously notified police of gunfire. Officers found Cooper unresponsive, still inside the vehicle, and a spent shell casing on the pavement nearby. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The precision of the wound and the angle of entry later confirmed he was shot from behind at close range. Detectives began piecing together the night through digital forensics. Lyft records showed the account that requested Cooper's ride was newly created with a fake name and prepaid card. Investigators matched the profile's IP address to a residence on Anna Street, a known address for both suspects. Surveillance footage captured a stolen sedan entering the garage there shortly before dawn. By mid-morning, SWAT surrounded the house. After several hours, the young men and two younger accomplices surrendered. Inside, police recovered 2 firearms, shell casings consistent with the murder weapon, and the first victim's stolen belongings. Interviews revealed that Mitchell had fired the fatal rounds. He admitted the group planned to rob drivers for cash and vehicles, saying the killing happened during the robbery. Peaks, who acted as a lookout, confessed to helping lure drivers and hide evidence afterward. Digital data, recovered lift logs, and gunshot residue all supported the confessions. Prosecutors emphasized the deliberate setup and the use of technology to deceive victims, calling it one of Dayton's most chilling examples of targeted gig worker violence. Both young men were transferred from juvenile to adult court. In 2024, Mitchell pleaded guilty to murder and aggravated robbery. Peaks entered guilty pleas to multiple counts, including murder, robbery, and vehicle theft. The Montgomery County Court sentenced Mitchell to 25 years to life and Peaks to 27 years to life. Public reaction centered on the safety of rideshare drivers rather than sympathy for the offenders. Their convictions closed a case that exposed deadly gaps in digital accountability and youth crime prevention. A ride meant to deliver someone home instead became evidence of how easily technology can turn trust into tragedy. Number 4. Al-Mutahan Mclean. It began with a quiet house on Kensington Drive, where the horrors behind closed doors would later shock an entire state. In 2019, 30-year-old Al-Mutahan Mclean lived in Dayton, Ohio, with his son Dakota, his fiancée Amanda Henze, and her sister Jennifer Ebert. To neighbors, it looked like an ordinary household. Inside, investigators would later uncover a place described in court as a house of torture. Over 4 years, Mclean isolated Dakota, pulling him from public school under the pretense of homeschooling, cutting him off from teachers and mandated reporters. Behind the padlocked doors, the child's life descended into systematic abuse that began when he was only 6 years old. Dakota was subjected to punishments that blurred the line between discipline and torture. Police later documented evidence that he was locked for hours in a dark attic, forced to hold painful stress poses for up to 20 hours a day, and beaten with belts and fists. Mclean poured hot sauce onto the boy's skin and fed him his own feces when he disobeyed. In December 2019, the routine escalated beyond survival. On December 12, Mclean repeatedly punched his son in the stomach while the two women stood by. By morning, Dakota was weak and unsteady. When he fell from the attic stairs, Mclean elbowed him in the back, dragged him into the bathroom, and forced him underwater. He then used a broken chair leg to inflict fatal internal injuries. At 5 p.m. on December 13, Mclean called 911, reporting that his son was unresponsive. Paramedics found he was cold to the touch, the home filled with the stench of neglect. Crime scene photographs showed bloodstains, a locked attic door, and a bathtub half filled with water. The coroner ruled the death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma and compressive asphyxia. Detectives interviewed all 3 adults separately. Mclean admitted to punishing Dakota and demonstrated positions he forced the boy to hold. Henze and Ebert corroborated years of physical and sexual abuse. A forensic report spanning 28 pages detailed old fractures, scars, and evidence of repeated assault. Child Services confirmed that multiple complaints about the home had been filed in prior years, none leading to removal. Mclean was arrested the same day. During the search, police recovered the chair leg, blood-stained clothing, and household restraints. The case quickly drew attention for its brutality and the systemic failures that allowed it. In 2021, Mclean pleaded guilty in Montgomery County Common Pleas Court to murder, rape, kidnapping, and child endangerment. He was sentenced to 51 years to life in prison. Henze received 22 to 27 years, and Ebert 8 to 12. Public reaction was restrained but heavy with disbelief. Prosecutors called it the worst case of child torture in Ohio's history. Mclean remains incarcerated in an Ohio state penitentiary with no parole eligibility until 2072. A crime hidden in plain sight became a symbol of institutional failure, a reminder that silence inside a home can sometimes echo louder than any scream. Number 5. Antawan, Benson, and Javen Connor. It began with a few angry posts online and ended with a girl dying in her sleep. In August 2024, brothers Antawan Benson and Javen Connor of Dayton, Ohio, turned a trivial social media dispute into one of the city's most heartbreaking murders. Their actions took the life of Isabella Amor Carlos, a 7th grade student who had nothing to do with their feud. Investigators later confirmed that Isabella's family was not the intended target. The violence stemmed from a digital argument involving a relative of the suspects, an argument that escalated from words to gunfire. On the night of the 22nd of August 2024, Benson and Connor confronted a woman in her car over a post that insulted their cousin. Witnesses said the encounter ended without violence, but resentment lingered. Just after midnight, the brothers returned to the area, driving down West Fairview Avenue armed with two high-powered rifles, an AK-47 and an AR-15. They opened fire from their vehicle, unleashing 37 rounds into 3 homes while residents slept inside. The sound of automatic gunfire tore through the quiet neighborhood. Upstairs in one of those homes, Isabella lay asleep in her bed. A single bullet pierced her bedroom wall, striking her in the chest. The impact woke her, and evidence showed she moved from the bed to the floor before collapsing. When police arrived, they found her unresponsive as her father tried desperately to revive her. Judge Gerald Parker later confirmed she had suffered and struggled in her final moments. The investigation began within hours. Detectives from the Dayton Police Department recovered over 30 spent shell casings scattered across the street. Surveillance and Ring doorbell footage captured flashes from 2 rifles and the shape of a dark vehicle speeding away. Crime lab technicians matched the casings to 2 distinct weapons. As leads developed, Miami Valley Crime Stoppers offered a $10,000 reward for information. Anonymous tips and digital forensics led police to Benson and Connor. A search warrant executed 5 days later uncovered both rifles, ammunition magazines, and a Facebook post showing the brothers displaying their empty clips in apparent celebration. Major Brian Johns described the investigation as one of the department's most disturbing, given the randomness of the victim and the cold precision of the attack. Forensic tests confirmed the recovered rifles fired the fatal bullet. Both suspects were taken into custody without incident around August 28. Detectives described their motive as retaliation for disrespect. Prosecutors argued the shooting was deliberate and reckless, fueled by ego and amplified by social media. In December 2025, both men were convicted in the Montgomery County Common Pleas Court. Benson was sentenced to 67 years to life, while Connor faced a similar term. The courtroom was silent as Isabella's father described the night he lost his daughter. Public reaction focused on the senseless link between social media disputes and real-world homicide, a growing trend in youth violence across Ohio. A moment of digital anger became a lifetime of loss, proof that online words can still draw real blood. Number 6. Travis D. Jackson. A few blades of grass turned a sunny workday into one of Dayton's most senseless murders. In September 2025, 36-year-old Travis Daniel Jackson stepped outside his home on Indiana Avenue and ended the life of a 22-year-old landscaper named Tanner Staggs. What began as a trivial complaint about grass clippings on a car escalated into a fatal confrontation that left a neighborhood stunned and a community asking how something so small could spark such violence. That morning, around 11 a.m., Staggs and his co-workers from Dunham's Lawn Care were cutting grass and blowing debris along the street. Witnesses said Jackson emerged from his home angry, shouting that grass and mud had gotten on his parked vehicle. Staggs assured him they would blow it off, but the tension did not fade. Within minutes, Jackson crossed the street, pulled a 9mm Glock 43X, and opened fire. Several rounds struck Staggs as he stood on the sidewalk near the lawn equipment. Workers ran for cover as 911 calls poured in. Responding officers found the victim collapsed on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds, one piercing his heart. He was rushed to Miami Valley Hospital but pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The investigation began immediately. Detectives from the Dayton Police Department recovered shell casings from the roadway and cordoned off the area for forensic analysis. Officers interviewed several witnesses who described Jackson's anger moments before the shooting. He had remained at the scene, and when approached by police, he admitted to firing the weapon. Inside his home, investigators recovered the Glock handgun and additional ammunition. Ballistic testing confirmed the gun matched the casings found at the scene. A neighbor's security camera also captured the confrontation, showing Jackson approaching with his firearm drawn. The footage became a critical piece of evidence, establishing the sequence of events and refuting early confusion about what triggered the gunfire. Prosecutors charged Jackson with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, and 1 count of discharging a firearm near a roadway, all carrying firearm specifications. He was taken to the Montgomery County Jail and held on a $1 million bond. His defense attorney, Anthony Van Noy, entered a plea of not guilty, claiming Jackson acted in self-defense after being struck during the argument. Detectives and witnesses, however, maintained that Staggs was unarmed and had made no threats. Forensic evidence supported that claim, showing the shots were fired from several feet away. The case drew swift public reaction. At preliminary hearings, prosecutors described the killing as an example of disproportionate rage, while community members expressed disbelief that a dispute over lawn debris could end in gunfire. Friends and co-workers of the victim launched a GoFundMe page that raised over $30,000 for funeral expenses. Travis Jackson remains in county custody awaiting trial, facing the possibility of life in prison. A confrontation over grass on a car became another reminder that anger, when armed, can turn ordinary moments into irreversible tragedy. Number 7. Nicole Cunigan. The morning began like any other, but within minutes, it would end in a scene of terror that scarred an entire neighborhood. In May 2024, 32-year-old Nico Cunigan Jr. of Dayton, Ohio, broke into the home of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Precious Taste, and murdered her and a boy named Deontay Johnson. Cunigan, who was on parole for a previous stabbing involving Taste, carried a violent history that had been escalating for years. His record included felonious assault, abduction, and weapons violations. At the time of the shooting, Taste was 14 weeks pregnant with his child and raising their twin 3-year-old daughters. The case was soon labeled one of Dayton's most disturbing domestic violence homicides. In the days leading up to May 22, Cunigan had sent threatening text messages to Taste, warning her that he was watching her every move. Investigators later found more than 50 pages of messages documenting her fear and his obsession. Around 6 o'clock that morning, he arrived at her home on Shaftesbury Road. Witnesses reported hearing an argument about her car and their relationship. Cunigan eventually left, only to return minutes later. This time, he forced open a bedroom window and began firing through it. The first bullet struck Deontay Johnson as he lay in bed under the covers. Then Cunigan climbed through the window and chased Taste through the house, shooting her multiple times before she collapsed near the stairs. Their children were in another room when the shots echoed through the home. At approximately 6:20 a.m., Cunigan fled in Taste's white Chevy Malibu. Responding officers found shattered glass, bullet casings, and a pushed-in window consistent with forced entry. Ballistics experts recovered several spent rounds and later matched them all to one firearm. Detectives from the Dayton Police Department immediately launched a manhunt, aided by U.S. Marshals and the Ohio State Highway Patrol. They traced his movements through surveillance footage and phone records, confirming that he had left Dayton within hours of the murders. The search lasted 2 months. On the 23rd of July, 2024, troopers spotted him driving a stolen Chevy Equinox near Cleveland. When approached, he led officers on a high-speed pursuit before abandoning the vehicle and fleeing on foot. Aviation units tracked him to a wooded area where he hid in an abandoned house. A special response team surrounded the structure and arrested him without further resistance. Forensic analysis confirmed Cunigan's fingerprints on the stolen car, the firearm, and shell casings from the scene. Investigators described the attack as deliberate, citing the threatening messages as proof of premeditation. Prosecutors presented this evidence in Montgomery County Common Pleas Court, where a jury convicted him on 10 counts, including multiple murders, felonious assault, and involuntary manslaughter for the unborn child. He was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 39 years. Public reaction focused on the tragedy's warning about unchecked domestic violence. A cycle of obsession, control, and violence ended in silence, leaving only children, grief, and a lifetime of consequences behind. Number 8. Quandric Morris-Oglesby. It started as a late-night dice game inside a Dayton lounge and ended with a gunshot that turned gambling into murder. In April 2025, 38-year-old Quandric Morris-Oglesby walked into Sugar's Lounge on North Main Street in Dayton. Known to police for past drug and weapons offenses, he was a familiar figure in the city's underground nightlife. That night, he joined a backroom dice game where 46-year-old Keeson Webb was already playing. Surveillance footage later showed Morris-Oglesby entering the bar around 2:10 a.m., being patted down by security and heading toward the game area. No weapon was found at the door. For nearly 2 hours, the men rolled dice across pool tables under dim lights while money changed hands. Around 4 a.m., the game took a violent turn. Witnesses described raised voices, followed by a flash from a firearm. The security camera captured Morris-Oglesby drawing a gun and shooting Webb at close range before grabbing a bag near the victim's body. He then moved through the lounge, leaving a trail of bloody footprints. Before escaping, he removed one of the bar's DVR systems to destroy evidence, then grabbed a ballistic vest from the kitchen and fled out the back door. When police arrived minutes later, Webb was found unresponsive with gunshot wounds to the torso. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. Detectives secured the bar, collecting shell casings and recovering one remaining DVR that had recorded portions of the shooting. The homicide unit began tracing Morris-Oglesby's movements through surveillance cameras around the neighborhood. Investigators learned he had fled to Middletown and likely received help from associates there. The case quickly drew national attention when the FBI joined the manhunt, announcing a $15,000 reward for information leading to his capture. For months, the suspect remained on the run. Authorities tracked sightings of him in Columbus, Xenia, Houston, and as far as Ocala, Florida. Detectives worked with the U.S. Marshals Service to issue interstate alerts. They described the fugitive as armed, dangerous, and known to wear body armor. The publicity campaign spread quickly online and across television networks. Facing mounting pressure, Morris-Oglesby turned himself in on the night of the 4th of November 2025. Security cameras recorded him entering the Montgomery County Jail lobby just before midnight. By 12:08 a.m., he was booked into custody without incident. A Montgomery County grand jury later indicted him on 10 felony counts, including 4 counts of murder, 2 of felonious assault, 2 of aggravated robbery, 1 of tampering with evidence, and 1 of having a weapon under disability. Prosecutors alleged the killing stemmed from a gambling dispute and that Morris-Oglesby robbed the victim immediately after firing. He is currently held on a $1 million bond awaiting trial. Public reaction focused on the senselessness of another shooting linked to nightlife and gambling culture in Dayton. A single bullet fired in anger turned a game of chance into a lifetime of consequences for everyone who watched it unfold. Each story we've uncovered tonight isn't just a headline, it's a mirror reflecting the darker corners of human impulse, greed, jealousy, rage, and vengeance. But the story doesn't end here. In our next episode, we'll expose more shocking cases that law enforcement once whispered about, the crimes too brutal, too strange, to believe. If you want to be among the first to see them, hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and stay with Justice Reversed, where truth always outlives the lie.